No Standing 8 Boxing Podcast. We discuss every organization and weight class with your host, Bronx Bomber, educated with the craft. Punch a topic hard like heavyweights, hitting the bag from the top rank to the upcoming. Washed up to the dark horse, champs, #1 contenders. Quick jab or sharp cross, we your source. Come get it. Tuning in, you can have it. Internationally known, our information is valid. See, we on a higher plane, no two episodes the same. We get better as we train, so on top we remain. Come join the conversation, this insight you'll gain. And then outside of the rain, we do the damn thing.
Hi, fight fans. Welcome to another edition of No Standing 8 Boxer Talk, powered by New York Fights. Boxing news with a gritty New York edge. Go to New York Fights and read about all our interviews. We cover fights, betting odds, and just about anything to do with combat sports. You can find it at New York Fights. Today, I got with me a young fighter, native of California, right?
Yes.
All right. Young George El YuYu Acosta, right?
Yes, correct. George El YuYu.
We're going to get to it, Juju. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming on and giving this interview. How are you doing?
Good. I'm good. Ready for next Friday fight. Training camp has been great, so I'm just excited.
Awesome. Yeah, you got a fight coming up next week, and you have a professional record of 13-1 with 1 KO, and you started your pro career in 2017. But for perhaps maybe the fight fans that don't know about you or don't know who you are, can you give us a little bit about your beginnings, where you're from, your family dynamics, and what brought you to the sport of boxing?
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up, I played every sport. I played soccer, baseball, everything, karate. But when I was 9 years old, I went to go visit. I'm actually wearing the shirt. Los Mochis are here. My parents, my parents are from Los Mochis, Sinaloa, which is a state in Mexico. And a family member at the time I wanted to go visit, a family member at the time was a professional boxer. And so he took me to the gym, right? And I went to the gym, and then, it was dirty. It was old. It smelled. I had some old smelly gloves, probably some mold in there. But for whatever reason, I fell in love with it. So I was 9 years old. I went to the gym with him. I hit the heavy bag. I hit the mitts with the coach there. And then when I came back, I told my parents, hey, I want to join boxing. So immediately I enrolled at the Sheriff Academy. They had a boxing program here in Whittier. And that was the start of my boxing journey. I was 9 years old, and then I had my first amateur fight when I was 11. And before that, I had multiple exhibition matches. Because it was an after-school program at the Sheriff Department, they would have a lot of Sheriff Department versus LAPD or Battle of the Badges, and they would have fighters like myself and other amateur fighters just compete to kind of start off the event for the fans. So that's where I started with boxing. I was amateur until 17, 18. I took a little break. I probably had about 60 amateur fights. Then I took a break because, at the time I thought I wanted to go to the Olympics and make the Olympic team. But looking back, I understand what it means to really want something. And if I go back and I really evaluate that, I didn't really want to make the team, and I didn't. So I took a break, went to school, but then after, my coach hit me back up, and I was thinking about boxing a lot too. And he happened to call me and was like, hey, I think it's time for you to come back. And I was like, man, I was about to call you. It is time to come back. So I came back, had a good solid year of losing all the weight that I have gained from that break. I probably went up a good 30, 40 pounds, and then I dropped the weight, and then made my professional debut in 2017.
And how long was that break from the time that you say you didn't want to really be in the Olympics to your coach called you?
Yeah, so that break was almost 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, but during that break, I just, since I've always been active since I was a kid, I joined a local jiu-jitsu gym here, Tillis in Whittier. And I started doing jiu-jitsu. I competed a little bit. I explored the idea of MMA. But then I'm like, this is not for me. I'd rather just, stick to what I know, which is boxing.
Exactly.
And so the break was about 2 years.
And when you say that you wanted to join the Olympics, but you really didn't want to, do you mean from like a mental perspective, a sold out perspective? Do you mean like that?
Yeah, because when I was younger, I the idea of being an Olympian, I feel like a lot of amateurs strive for that, right? You want to Olympic is like the highest, it's like the pinnacle of boxing before, becoming like a world champion or something. Um, and the professional realm. But as an amateur, like everyone kind of, or a lot of fighters strive to be an Olympian. So that was something that I wanted and I liked. I'm like, oh, I want to try to make the Olympic team in 2016. And I went to national tournaments. I won a couple, but I never really stood out. And yeah, I mean, just looking back at the training, and I always trained hard and with purpose. But I think deep down inside, I'm like, I wasn't. I don't know. I guess it was more of a mental thing where I'm like, I say I wanted it, but I probably didn't want it as bad,
Yeah, I
Um,
understand. And wow, so you make your pro debut, all right? Most of the time I usually ask like, hey, so what made your decision to turn pro? But in this case, it was kind of like a calling, and you came back. So you had an awkward transition because it wasn't like you finished like a national tournament or you were just done with amateur boxing. You took a whole like full 2 years off. So
yeah,
so you had to knock off some cobwebs, you had to knock off some rust, and then you went into the pros.
yeah.
How was that transition like?
You know
From
what? Actually, it wasn't too big of a transition because since I joined the jujitsu gym, they were also doing boxing there, and I was still doing my own boxing workouts outside. It just wasn't as structured as it is like when you're competing, like you have a specific structure, training 5, 6, sometimes 7 days a week. But I was still involved in the fight game. So the transition wasn't too terrible. And in fact, I feel like I grew a lot and I learned a lot when I took that break because I didn't have the pressure of competing. So I was able to really analyze the sport in a more a deeper way. When you're in the zone, when you're always training for something specifically, like it's hard to really stop and reflect on what you've learned. But when you take a break and you don't have pressure of competing, you're able to really like analyze like, okay, I'm lacking on this, I'm lacking on that. I got to improve on this, I got to improve on that. So by the time I came back, sat down with my coach, we talked, and we worked on a lot of those things that we were lacking in our amateur.
you are so you start your pro career, and I mean you blaze. You win your first 7 fights, and then
Yeah.
you run into a guy named Ruben Torres, and that was your first professional loss.
Yeah.
Uh, and since then, you've won you went undefeated in 6 fights. And what happened that fight, and how do you feel? Uh, you've how do you feel you've matured as a fighter since that loss into the fighter you are today?
Yeah. So actually, a lot of fighters are bummed and disappointed with their loss, but I actually look at that loss as a victory, and not in the sense of like, oh, on the record I should have won, none of that, but it's more of like I took that loss and I'm like, okay, perfect. This is what I have to work on. This is what I have to improve on. These are the mistakes that I need to correct and need to fix. Um, and yeah, I mean that loss against Ruben was I mean, at the moment, of course, I was, feeling down, but then after, when you reflect on all the mistakes you made and you make, objective goals and try to correct all those mistakes, and which I did and made those improvements, and I've been on a run on a winning streak, and competition has been elevated as well throughout those fights. You know, not my last fight, but the fight before, I had fought for a WBA Fede Centro belt in Florida. It was televised, and I won that fight. And then my last fight, I won as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you started boxing, I mean, you were pretty active, fighting 3 or 4 times a year, 3 times a year. In 2022, you only fought once. Why the inactivity?
Yeah. I just a couple of injuries during training. You know, I have one injury, one nagging injury, and then so I wouldn't fight. And then I'll get a fight scheduled, and then the fight would get canceled. You know, I had a couple I actually had a few scheduled fights that fell off due to opponent issues or yeah, things like that.
Every fighter seems to have that bumpy year. So 2022 was just that year for you.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So I'm looking to stay active this year, you know. It's time.
All right. Well, that brings us to your next opponent. What do you know about him?
Yeah, actually, you know, this is one of my opponents that I was supposed to fight last year, I think 2022. But then he had an injury. I think a week of the fight or something. So I was actually scheduled to fight Sims last year. And he's tall. I think he's a good fighter. He's a good boxer. He's slick. He likes to move. He's a southpaw. So I think it's going to be a really interesting matchup because I like to box as well, you know. And so there's got to be either one really dominant boxer or a change of game plan has to happen, and that's what we're striving for this fight. Change a little bit, increase pressure, you know, make him uncomfortable fight when he doesn't want to fight, and yeah.
And so for the fans tuning in next week that perhaps may have never seen you fight before, can you describe to them what you believe your fighting style is? Or you're a boxer puncher, a boxer? A counter puncher? What do you consider yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to say, but this upcoming fight will probably not be a true representation of my style, only because we have to make some adjustments. But I would define myself as more of a counter puncher and a boxer. You know, I do have long arms for my height and for my weight. So I like to box. I like to pick my shots. I'm not necessarily a volume puncher. I'm not really an inside fighter, even though we've been practicing that a lot. I like to box. I like to pick my shots. I like to think my way. I like to make my opponents think as well. And yeah, so I would consider myself more of a boxer.
You know, the boxing world is very critical. I mean, if you get on boxing Twitter, oh my God, if you the critiques and people could be pretty cruel, pretty harsh. For the fans that look at your record and be like, this guy got one loss, he only got one KO, so he had Paxton Power. Man, this guy can't fight. What do you say to those critics? I know you get that a lot, don't you?
Yeah, actually, yeah. I mean, I don't. I love it. I love when people critique. I love when people talk. It's they're not wrong in a sense. They're just making observations on the record. But it's a different story when you're in the ring. You know, it's a big difference. It's a huge difference. I feel like a lot of, as far as like my record, 13-1 and one knockout. I don't have a lot of knockouts, but I feel like I've hurt every single one of my opponents. And my issue with the knockout, or as not having a high knockout, I feel like is that I don't finish my opponents. You know, I can hurt my opponents, and I have, you know, I've dropped multiple of my opponents, but I just don't finish. Which is something we've been practicing and sometimes something that we've been working on a lot, where it's like, hey, if we identify a hurt opponent, step on the gas, you know, because if you don't step on the gas, you're going to allow them to recover. And hey, in a boxing match, you never know. You never know. You could be doing everything right, and all it takes is one punch, and the fight can be over. So, yeah, that was something I would say to the people or boxing Twitter, where it's look at the whole picture, not just one specific thing.
Gotcha. So after next week, what's next, man?
Whatever. I'm ready. I'm, everything. If all turns out good, hopefully back at the end of April, or if for some reason hop on a May card, early May, Cinco de Mayo weekend or something. That'd be awesome.
If you had it your way, how many times would you fight this year?
I think a good number would be at least 4, maybe 5 fights. That'd be good. I think that's pretty active.
Yeah. I think 4 is a little bit more realistic. 5 is busy.
Yeah,
5 is busy. But 4 sounds good. 4 sounds good. And so listen, you're 5 years into a pro career, 4.5, going on 5 to a pro career. You're 26 years old. Do you feel you have to make a statement now? Do you feel like the door's sort of closing in on you a little bit? I mean, right around 26, 27, the guys have been in 5, 6 years. They're already contending for world titles. Some guys of your caliber, of your skill. Do you feel like maybe you're a little behind the other fighters?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it wasn't for the last, I want to say, year and a half of either dealing with injuries or fights falling off, I feel like I would definitely be in the minds of more people. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I feel like this year has to be the year where it has to be my breakout year. I'm the way I think about it is every fight is my last fight. I think every fight has to be treated like your last fight, because you never know when your last fight really is. This sport is dangerous. But yeah, absolutely. This year I'm looking at one fight at a time, but I have to make a statement this year.
All right.
Definitely.
All right. And as you progress, do you have any call outs in mind? Anybody you wouldn't want to share the ring with?
Not anyone specifically, but anyone that will definitely put me in the rankings. So whether that's a ranked fighters, or I mean, that's the only way I guess we can be in the rankings, if you fight ranked fighters. So yeah.
I think after next weekend, you get the W, which I'm confident you will. You start to look to position yourself. That's good stuff. Good stuff. All right, man. So where does El YuYu? What's that? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so YuYu, my sister, which she's older by 1 year, but when she was younger, she couldn't say my name, so she would just say YuYu, and from there, everyone calls me YuYu. People at the gym call me YuYu. My family back in Mexico, they don't even know my first name; they just call me YuYu. My parents, everyone just calls me YuYu. So it's a family nickname that stuck, and I like it. YuYu, it's easy. It's easy.
Absolutely. Listen, what is it for all the fans that follow you, for the folks that may have not seen you, what message do you have before we close out?
For those that have not seen me, well, tune in next week, Friday, February 10th. You guys will be able to see me. It'll be on YouTube. It'll be on Facebook, Thompson Boxing Promotion, their website as well. If you guys would like to follow me on social media, you guys can follow me at George Acosta 562. Also make YouTube videos on boxing, nutrition, and exercise, and share a lot of boxing education videos. If you guys want to follow me there, it's just El YuYu or YuYu Boxing, and then I put out a lot of videos there that people can learn from.
All right, fight fans, there you have it. George Acosta, El YuYu, 26 years old, native of California, looking to make a statement next week and in 2023. He hopes to elevate himself in the rankings. I mean, he could fight. He's charismatic, has $1 million smile. And I'll tell you, folks, man, this kid has a future. So follow him. Check him out next week. George, thank you for your time, man. I really appreciate it, man. I really enjoyed this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. This was great.
All right, man. Well, I'm rooting for you. I wish you all the best of luck moving forward. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
No Standing 8 Boxer Podcast. We discuss every organization and weight class with your host, Bronx Bomber, educated.